Dragon Ball DAIMA Episode 5 review. Let's get it started. Alright, so for these reviews, I don't just want to summarize the episode because I kind of low-key do that in the Easter egg videos. I want to go over a few points and let y'all know what I was thinking about this episode. So firstly, there's a bunch of things that stood out about this episode, especially with Pansy, like the similarities that Pansy had to Chi-Chi from early Dragon Ball. There are some things in this episode that I believe could lead to
I put that thing
payoffs
on there for a
down
long
the
time,
road.
Like
they mentioned a few things such as like the rest of the gang still, they're gonna need a pin number to get to the demon realm. And I find it strange how it's almost like with GT. One issue with GT was that I don't think they didn't show the cast after like episode 2 or 3. They might have showed them at the beginning of 3. Like Bulma and Chi-Chi, thinking like, where's everybody at? Like in space. But one thing that they didn't do in GT was show the cast until like episode 25. They went like almost 22 episodes or something without showing the other half of the cast. And that's something that, kind of like it's almost like the Tournament of Power, where it's like it's the same setting for so long without any cuts to something else, where it kind of just starts blending in with one another, and to a degree it can get boring at times. So with Dragon Ball Daima, this episode, it dawned on me. I was like, wait a minute. Like with the last episode, I was talking about, where is Goma? This episode, I'm thinking, why haven't there been any cutbacks to the planet, like to Earth, where Bulma's like fixing the ship? Like there could be just updates. I'm not saying you gotta, divert the story entirely, but at the very least, like have some updates, like of the people on Earth, fixing the like Bulma, Vegeta, Piccolo. At the very least, like show Bulma fixing the ship, Piccolo and Vegeta, wondering or theorizing how they're gonna get there, Kibito, all that stuff. And nothing since episode 2, 1. It's a bit weird, and that's why that's probably the reason why like episodes 2 and 3 felt a bit slower than 4 and 5 in that way, because there weren't cutbacks to the cast members, which is another reason why GT kind of felt a bit slow during that era, even though the story moved really fast in episode 1 and 2. But that's another reason why this show could feel like it's moving slow paced, aside from them like walking and stuff like that, which I mentioned in the last review. It's like Goku could have just used the Nyoibo with everybody on it to say, all right, take us to the other side of the third demon realm. Like if he can take that thing to the moon, shouldn't he be able to take it to the other side of the demon realm like nothing? But I mean, the third demon world is the biggest of all 3, so who knows how big it is. But still, it's like, I'd rather he not even bring the Nyoibo if, he was gonna, use it in that way. And it's because Goku had raised it up in that episode. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, you can watch my other review for, episode 4. He if you're gonna do that, just grab everybody on the stick, kind of like they did with the Sky Seed, and, basically transport everyone there. Transport everyone there to the next, side of the demon world. But that didn't happen. So that's one thing that, I'm a bit iffy on. And you know what? Speaking of being iffy, Glorio's behavior has been pretty iffy these last few episodes, and Kyle Sheen has been checking him on it. Or Sheen, I guess, as you want to call him, if you want to call him that. He's, kind of like finding holes in Glorio's story. He's like, wait a minute. So you told us the king told you to come get us, but the king didn't even know that they were turning to kids. It's almost sounded like you went to the king. So like Shin, he's like very suspicious of Glorio, and it's almost like Goku doesn't even care. He's just like, all right, whatever. Like, so like I can still whoop him anyway. It's funny. But, stuff like that, I find things like that intriguing, where in like if we're going to compare Daima to GT in this way, I think that's a good thing Daima is doing that GT didn't do at first. It did it later on with when they started arriving at M2 with Giru, but early on, I think the sense of mystery and suspense to keep people like thinking, okay, what's gonna happen next? Like that bit of mystery that you need in order to have, like, it's a cliffhanger. Like if y'all have ever seen wrestling, like the WWF, Monday Night Raw, WCW, like they would leave you on a cliffhanger so that you could be wondering what's gonna happen next week, so that you tune in. it's way stronger here than it is with the earlier stages of GT. And I'm not saying GT's bad or anything. I love GT, but I'm just saying they're doing a better job of it here than it was done. And I would say maybe even in Dragon Ball, like the early stages of Dragon Ball, like, because that's another thing that this series gets compared to. Like the early stages of Dragon Ball, I believe this Daima is doing a better job of keeping suspense, at very least in the earlier stages of. And when you compare all three series, I think Daima's doing the best job, in my perspective. But that's, probably recency bias. Dragon Ball did have good hangers. Did I say good hanger? Good cliffhangers. Like with the Carrotizer Bunny and Bulma being turned into a carrot, stuff like that. Them being trapped in Pilaf's, dungeon, and Goku transforming. So stuff like that. And same thing with GT, like I mentioned, with Giru, turning on them, all this stuff. Even like when they got turned into dolls, which is kind of like Bulma getting turned into a carrot. So, all right, so in GT, they had people get turned into dolls. I'm going on a bit of a side tangent. But in side tangent, really? How redundant. But I'm going on a bit of a tangent. But in GT, they turned people into dolls, right? And in Dragon Ball, it was turning them into carrots. What are they going to turn them into in Dragon Ball Daima? Plants? I mean, that's what their name puns seem to be coming from. They got flower name puns. I wouldn't be surprised if someone gets turned into a flower in this series. I mean, he had people turn into carrots in Dragon Ball, and like kind of like their equivalent of the first arc. Same thing with GT, people getting turned into dolls. So it's like, what's next? Flowers? I mean, it makes sense. I mean, they all have magical tricks in the demon realm, which is a nice segue. Every demon, according to Pansy, has one magic trick, and hers is telekinesis, telekinesis, or rock manipulate. Well, just manipulation of matter, something like that. It's telekinesis, from what I saw. But she's also really good with machines. She's like a mixture of Bulma and Chi-Chi, and I mentioned this in the Easter egg video. And I also saw Danny, or Geekdom 101's video on this, and he mentioned how she's kind of like Princess Leia from Star Wars, with Goku being Luke Skywalker, right? And because Glory Hole is Han Solo. And that's kind of fitting. I mean, I only seen the first Star Wars movie, and it was a long time ago, but that's very fitting. That seems, because Toriyama did like Star Wars, so it makes sense. But I think the parallels to Chi-Chi and Bulma also work here as well for Pansy. She's actually a really good character. I actually like this character a lot. They were hiding secrets from her, well, it was really Glorio telling them, oh, don't, stop talking to her. Kind of like trying to shoo her away. And they didn't realize that she was the princess. So it kind of worked out in her favor. That was another aspect I liked about this episode. And, really, I mean, that's pretty much, I mean, is there anything bad? Oh, yeah. Hold on. Wait a minute. I didn't even mention Goku transforming. All right, hold on. So Goku transforms for 4 seconds, and I mentioned this in the Easter egg video, that it was kind of similar to episode 5 of GT, where he transformed against Redict or Legic. And like I mentioned in that video, yes, Legic's name is a pun on credit, because remember Omega taxing the citizens, stuff like that. But yeah, he transforms for a brief second, and to get the people off him that he was sparring against. And I mean, okay, so he, it's almost like, I don't want to say this, I don't want to call it pointless, because it serves a purpose, right? So Goku's still learning, getting adept to his body, which I also believe that Daima's doing a better job at, illustrating Goku growing, not growing physically, but growing into his kid body, getting used to it, than GT did. Because I mean, Goku, he was having issues in GT, but they weren't as blatant. They weren't making it as blatant as they were in Daima. So that's a good thing for Daima, right? But it's almost like, yes, he transformed in this episode. He went SS1 briefly. It's definitely to set up a fight with the Tamagamis or something. The Tamagami or something else coming in the future. And because I can see why they did it. They didn't want to make it seem like, okay, he just pulled this out of his butt. So I can understand that. It was very brief, almost pointless to a degree. But I mean, he could have went Kaioken. But he chose to transform, which is, I mean, it gives this title a more, it gives this episode more GT comparisons. But, other than that, this episode, I think Daima's getting better and better as it goes on. The last 2 episodes, I would say, were better than 3 and 2. Episode 1 was good. I didn't realize, at first when I was, watching the episode 1, that 1/3 of the whole episode was dedicated to a flashback. Like, I just saw Dragon Ball Kai, the final chapters, episode 1, and only 5 minutes of that episode, or like roughly 1/4 of the episode, was dedicated to, flashing back or catching people up. Episode 1 of this series, it was like a whole third of the episode. It was insane. If the animation wasn't so good, if the art wasn't so beautiful, it probably would have pissed me off, right? Nah, I'm joking. I'm not a crash out like that. But another thing I noticed was, the other, what's it called, little freaking recap that they do before the episodes, like with the, like, this is Goku, he was a boy from the mountains, stuff like that. That came back in this episode. I thought they were done with that, like, an episode ago. I remember thinking, like, wait, what? Was this supposed to be here last week? Like, did I skip over it when I watched it? But, yeah, no, they just brought it back. Okay, But, overall, this episode, it went well. It went well. There are some things, like, they built up. And like the Tamagami, Goku's, body getting better. Their friends from Earth coming. Different things like that. And Glorio's, suspicion of Glorio. So there's so many things that they built up and they're doing really well with, that it's going to be great to see how this plays out in later episodes. As well as, Goma's, plans and like the different factions coming, like, wanting power stuff, all that stuff. It's gonna, come to a head in later episodes, and it's a good thing. Like, what they're doing right now is great. They're building it up great. So many different, like, threads to be woven in together and stuff like that. So yeah, that was the review. Watch the Dragon Ball Super highest and lowest ratings video, as well as my Easter eggs video for Dragon Ball Daima, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. See y'all later.